Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers build retail media and product detail page content faster than ever before at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Brad Santanna, head of Omnichannel Marketing, Strategic Customers, Insights, and Analytics at the Hershey Company. Brad has dedicated over 23 years to the Hershey Company and has a wealth of experience in driving innovative growth strategies and gaining a deep understanding of consumer insights. Today, he is at the forefront of shaping Hershey's omnichannel approach. Please enjoy my conversation with Brad Santanna. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Would you take us back? How'd you get your start in the space?
Within the confection space, I ironically grew up in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, really had no intention of working for the company, kind of coming out of school, fell in love with the CPG space, just doing some investigations postgraduate, and ironically ended up getting an offer from the company. But my dad had worked for the company in a different function years ago. My sister actually at one point had worked for the company. So it's in our blood, I guess you could say.
Tell us what it's like growing up with such an amazing name in the town.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never had a chance to come, the streets here in the town of Hershey are lined with Hershey Kisses as the lights up and down the street. On a number of days, you can be walking around and smell chocolate in the air, which is kind of special to have. But it's based on its history, on being founded by Milton Hershey and the mission to support orphaned and disadvantaged children. For that to come today, there's a really big cultural element of knowing that the work that we do here on the business helps support a bigger cause. So it's really special.
Amazing! What a great story, having the family in the business. You've been with the company 23 years. Talk to us about that. It's quite a feat. What are some of your favorite moments in your work with the company?
Yeah, over time, you get to fall in love with a lot of different brands, and over that time, you acquire a number of different brands. So I've seen some brands that have fallen off. I've seen some new brands that have come on. One of the first brands that we had launched when I started a number of years ago was Take 5, which is a Reese's brand. And when you talk to people about Take 5, there are people that think that is the greatest candy bar on earth, and why don't I see it more? Why don't you do more? But it really always ties you back to the great emotional connection that people have with our brands. A lot of times people think that it's worth more than what it actually costs to make. So if you give someone a free candy bar, they think it's worth $10, and it's certainly not. It doesn't cost that much. So to have brands that resonate with people on an emotional level is a special place to be.
Amazing. Well, certainly a staple in our household. So thank you for that.
What's your favorite?
Oh, just a classic Hershey bar, because we're big fans, as you probably can imagine, with young kids doing s'mores. And so that has, to your point, these memories and this emotional connection that really you can't put any price on that. Just having that memory is the most amazing, incredible thing. So we're super appreciative of the products that you make, that we get to bring them into the family. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's incredible. Talk to us a little about the work you're doing. The last few years, you've been working in digital and omni, and maybe paint for us a little bit kind of your path at Hershey, if you would, and then how you kind of got more involved in digital and omni-channel.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been someone that's tried to play to my strengths. One of my main ones is that I love to solve unique and challenging business problems. And regardless of the discipline, I've always been attracted to work on some of those things, whether it be across traditional sales, category management, what was shopper marketing, omni marketing, traditional marketing, you name it. So I've had roles in each of those functions over the years, doing a variety of things from scaling new capabilities to working on emerging customers. And I feel like the diversity of that experience has helped really prepare me for what's a very complex space in omnichannel, right? It's new in many ways, but there's a lot of different data. It's dynamic in terms of algorithms and things that shape things like search. There's a media component. So to me, getting all that experience over the 23 years really set me up for that success. I would say if we think about broader omni-channel now, we can see the tremendous growth it's driving for some of our top retailers, not just within the Hershey Company, but what I read outwardly with some of the other companies as well. And when we meet with customers, one of the first things that they say is one of their top priorities is winning in the digital space because of the customer loyalty, the larger baskets, a chance to get that shopper in their ecosystem and keep them there. So to have had all the customer experience, the marketing experience, the category management experience, and be able to speak holistically about the business, I hope puts me at a differential advantage from not just our competition, but my peers in the space to be able to speak about the business.
When you kind of made this move into digital and omni specifically, did it feel like a risk that you were taking, or how did you think about making that move into that area?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. The first stint in digital was actually managing our Amazon business. And while I've had been in marketing before, I had never been responsible for retail media. So I had to learn that. And having been on Amazon, as folks that have managed that business know, there's not typically a person that you regularly connect with as you would a buyer in store. So you're really relying on your ability to look at the data and create and drive actions that you hope drive positive outcomes. At the time, our Amazon business wasn't very profitable, so there was a lot of foundational work we needed to do across anything from supply chain and logistics to portfolio management to get that in order. And I'm happy to say we made some pretty significant progress in that over the past 4 years to the point where we can afford to more profitably grow with them.
What's an example of something, maybe a before and after, where you looked at an area of the business, supply chain or the digital shelf, and you saw it in a certain place, and now looking back 4 years later, you go, wow, that's really, of course, there's always more to do, but it's in a place that I'm really excited about.
It's interesting having worked in traditional brick and mortar retail. So as we think about something as simple as distribution, you would think about the more distribution I have, the better. My more points of interruption likely mean better sales, more our better share, overall market share, et cetera. When hopping into the Amazon business, we quickly realized that not only are some of the SKUs that we were selling weren't profitable for Amazon, but they weren't profitable for us either. So to start in your first couple months and maybe counterintuitively say,
going to do less.
We have to discontinue a couple hundred items from the everyday store to make ourselves more profitable and focus our resources appropriately on the things that we think we can differentially grow the business was a little bit of a different approach from more traditional retail, but we quickly saw our ability to work the algorithm so that if we're selling profitable things that sell well, those things scale very quickly. So that would be one I would say in terms of just broader portfolio strategy and management versus how you traditionally approach it in brick and mortar.
It's a great insight. When we were preparing for the interview, one thing you had mentioned was this idea of holistic captaincy when it comes to thinking about the category and category management. Tell us what that means and how you're thinking about it.
Sure. So for our omni-channel retailers, as you think about the shopper path to purchase, it could start anywhere along the journey, both digitally or in store, and it can continue to go back and forth all the way to that final point of transaction. What traditional retail provides is a more definitive approach and more defined data sets from things like IRI and Circana to Nielsen in terms of how you measure and monitor the business. But as we looked more closely at measuring digital success outside of traditional POS sales, there's certain things that we have to think about in terms of measuring our holistic share of search, which includes paid and organic. If we think about some of the other KPIs that you might look at that are in some cases very similar to brick and mortar, but also differential in the way you approach digital, there's a little bit of a disconnect between how you think about those two areas coming together between physical and digital, and how we harmonize not a million KPIs, but a handful of KPIs to consistently look across, both sides and what essentially becomes full omnichannel. So when you think about it in terms of the shopper path to purchase, and you think about what the brick and mortar KPI is and its relative equivalent to digital, you can quickly come up with a handful that allow you to see how things are moving back and forth between those two areas, what's working and not working, and then you click down into some secondary and tertiary KPIs that give you some insight on some of the actions you need to take to drive the business. And we've been building out that capability over the past couple of years here at Hershey.
What are some of those KPIs that you're focused on when it comes to digital?
Yeah, I mean, a big one for us, just by the nature of our category, is household penetration. So household penetration for the confectionery category is just about 99%. I like to joke around that it's slightly more than toilet paper, which is either really scary or not, depending on how you look at it, because I think most people probably use that. But
right.
When you think about a category that has as high household penetration as we do over 52 weeks, and you start to look at the penetration in store versus online, it's vastly different. In fact, it under indexes online versus in store by a fair amount. So as we think about changing shopper behavior and category visibility, how might we make the case with the right insights and stories to get visibility to our category where it's not today? And some of that might be, how it's basket additive, to some of the other occasions that are out there. So think about something like Halloween. And while, confection is the number one driver of purchase during that season, a lot of times online, you'll see things like costumes or party planning. So how do you work back with site merchandising and some of those partners to make sure it's an and as part of that equation? And then how do you look at the data to show that it's basket additive, and you get people in the category so that as they become more planned behavioral purchases from shopping off lists and doing those things, that we've cracked that initial nut of getting someone to think about our category.
This is great. How do you think about kind of the year and the storytelling and the content through the year? Because I imagine, especially in this category, you do have those really big kind of anchor tenant events, those tentpole windows. But then you want to be present the rest of the year, like my s'mores example. Tell us a little about that. How's the year work?
Yeah, this is where the fun begins, I guess, right? So we have some broader insights that would tell us there's a number of not just traditional occasions, but micro occasions that happen throughout the year. So you mentioned s'mores. There'd be summer. Birthdays happen throughout the year. There's gifting opportunities. There's mini holidays, etc. So as we think about content management and brand and portfolio relevance, we do a lot of mapping to not only keywords, but occasions. And the insight I mentioned on Halloween with different categories, we try to bring that information to not only the buying desk, but also others internally at the customer to help shape what those experiences look like. The traditional seasons are a little bit more proven, and I won't use the word easy because nothing's ever completely easy, but more palatable to get going. But I think what you have to be willing to do is a lot of test and learn scenarios to kind of prove different things out and figure out, not just how I get to the holy grail of what I'm trying to get to, but like the iterative steps of like prove this, next thing, till we get to where we ultimately want to go.
And what does a test and learn look like for you? Is that a few weeks? Is it months? Or what is a kind of success case?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the objective. When you're in season, it's really hard to get a read if you're doing too many things at one time or you're being too quick in the analysis. So typically, we would have a hypothesis before the season started and test it out and kind of read postmortem afterwards, unless there was something that really popped off the page where it was really bad or really good and we needed to pivot in time. But I've usually found, at least from my experience in the category, that there's things that are different across occasions and seasons, but there's also some universal principles. So chances are, if you figured out something that worked for Halloween, you might be able to apply some of those same learnings to a different season.
What are some examples of content? I mean, this category is amazing, right? 99% household penetration. What are some content or partnerships or things you've done of late that have been new and different and interesting in the terms of engaging the shopper?
So I can think of one even just a couple of years ago that has kind of transformed across to some other experiences online. So we had approached one of our larger digital retailers a couple of years ago with the similar insights that we shared. There wasn't full alignment at the time because of the resources required to create a dedicated site merchandising space for us to completely change how we went with our plan for Halloween. So we created a landing page in partnership with the media arm of the digital retailer that we were talking about here, and the landing page allowed you to toggle back and forth between costumes and candy. And the thought was, if one was searching for one, and we partnered with Ruby's at the time, which was the leading costume player in the Halloween space, and we figured if we can get someone in one ecosystem, maybe we can have them tag onto the other ecosystem. And what we found by pulling together a comprehensive media plan and merchandising plan shared with Ruby's is we equally benefited by having people coming into one category and expecting something, but then also behaving and buying something else, to the point where it actually started to influence some of the site merchandising for Halloween, and thinking about how to more holistically bring it to life with the shopper online. So that's an example, as I just talked about a minute ago, of like starting somewhere and working your way up iteratively, and continue to improve things out so that you can ultimately get where you want to go.
It's amazing. Now, the other kind of challenge and opportunity you have in this space is this idea of how do you introduce a new product, or what do you do that's kind of a new launch when it comes to the space? And you've got some pretty neat examples of partnerships you've done, launches you've done. Will you tell us a little about some of those?
Sure. We actually just did one most recently in our new gummy brand called Shaq A-Licious. So Shaq A-Licious is a partnership with Shaquille O'Neal, where we've created gummies that in some cases mirror his physical appearance. So you can actually bite Shaq's head off in some of our bags. There's also some other shapes that are tied, to Shaq based on nicknames or other things tied to him. So as we think about something that wasn't tied to one of our traditional brands in the sweet space, like a Twizzlers or a Jolly Rancher, we had to think about the swim lane of where that brand would play, and even think about content and keywords in places where we've never been before, and how might we, in partnership with the retailer and the media arm, pull together a comprehensive plan to get the product off the ground quickly, especially with all the social media buzz and things that he helped us generate, and take advantage of that interest in the traffic to organically drive that item up within search rank to be found and then convert. So we work back holistically with this retailer on the launch, and even as of today, as I look, we're organically ranking on page one for the number of key terms that we went after, and we've seen some tremendous sales out of the gate here with the Shaq A-Licious brand itself. So to organically launch a brand from scratch and have within a couple weeks, relevancy on some of the top terms that we would want to rank on page one is a big success for us.
A lot of our listeners would like to move faster or quicker, but also need to align with retailer requirements. You've got joint business planning, you've got brand guidelines. Tell us a little about the timeline for something like this launch that you just did. When you think of moving quickly, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, in this particular instance, it's sometimes I don't feel like we ever feel like we move fast enough, but this is a good example for us in terms of Hershey, where I think we did, where we sat down cross-functionally internally with the brand teams, the content team, the Omni team, and the sales team, and discussed all of the elements from a total Omni perspective, in-store merchandising, the type of creative we wanted to have show up, our objective in terms of, like I mentioned, search and keyword targeting that we wanted to have. How does this holistically fit in with maybe a little bit of a soft launch to coincide with the social media nationally that we produce, but then it's going to be followed by merchandising and distribution. So how are we thinking about pacing? So part of it is, no one loves a lot of meetings, but I think if you intentionally think about it more of like a briefing process and get it out on the table and think about more so certainly strategy first, but then also like what are the key elements that each of us need to do in what manner in a specific time frame. I'm really pleased with the work the broader organization did to help us deliver to get that launch right and to have it be a success. So I would say be very clear and intentional in your strategy and your brief. It's easy to put things in PowerPoint slides, but if you need a different mechanism to help you articulate it and coordinate it to get that quick alignment, but be intentional in the actions required and the timelines and focus more on those than just drowning yourself in strategic intent.
So well said. The other challenge we see is you've got retail media and you've got digital shelf and you've got in-store. And ideally, like you're talking about, it all magically works together. Is there a formula you have, or was there some epiphany in there as you were doing this that kind of enabled you to get everyone on that same page and make it all come together?
And in fairness, we planned very similar for other events. I think the only nuance here that it was a new brand.
Yeah.
So we might have launched this a little bit differently than we would have approached maybe a different innovation previously, or even thinking about a season. The fact that Shaq, transcends across multiple demographics, well-known presence. It was like, how do we take advantage of some of what he brings to the table and think about how that paces within our broader media and activation plan? So I would say that was probably the biggest difference.
Looking ahead to you've mentioned this journey over the past 3-4 years. What are you focused on the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Well, I mentioned the household penetration piece in the upfront, and that's a goal of ours to continue to try to find ways to use the data and insights to tell the stories, to influence different parties, both internally and externally, to drive the strategy and the plan to get there. So if I think about seasons, that tends to over-index in household penetration during key times. It's really about not just thinking about the handful of weeks of that season and how I take advantage of that, or the organization does, and move on. If we can get people into the category in any way we can, whether it's a new Shaq innovation, whether it's a season, how do we develop that plan to continue to talk to that shopper, get ourselves on the list, and create that repeatable purchase that tends to happen online as people shop from favorites and lists and subscribe and save and all those different things. So part of that too is thinking a little bit differently about what investment in ROI means. So if you look at a shorter term attribution window, 14 or 30 days, you typically can say, hey, I got to this ROI. But if you're able to start thinking about ways to measure a longer path to ROI in terms of, hey, it wasn't just the 14 or 30 days, I got someone in this category. My content and messaging is connecting with them. They're on the list. They're repeating. There's a value to that today in traditional measurement, it doesn't come through as easily, but we have some great partners here, both internally at the company as well as with our retail partners that are interested to continue to figure that out. So I would say driving household penetration, get them on the list, and rinse and repeat.
And when you talk about that attribution window, you're kind of referring to the stats I would get from my search campaign, where I've got the 14, 30-day kind of windows that I could usually look at.
Absolutely. Yep. We spent a lot of time thinking about the creative, the audience targeting, the media tactics, et cetera. And then we produce a result. But now we have a captured shopper and a consumer that we have to figure out how to continue to keep in our brands in that purchase cycle past that point in time. And that's really the goal.
And now this might be in the secret sauce of how the product gets made. But when it comes to the creative, and someone comes up with, say, an idea of working with a legend like Shaq, how do those ideas come about? Where do they get generated, or what's the genesis of them in the organization?
Yeah, I think that's where coming up with a holistic briefing process and planning process really is important. So certainly we have a great creative team here at the company that's their job, and that's what they're good at, to help do that. And they work in partnership with Shaq himself and his team to think about how that gets communicated at a very high level awareness driving standpoint. As we think about, a little bit more, and everyone will argue the funnel has collapsed, but I'll call it what it is, a little bit lower funnel in terms of consideration and conversion. We've got an interested shopper in the category. So how might that creative messaging with someone who is interested change? to help move them into that conversion stage and ultimately buy the product. So it's really about understanding that shopper journey and figuring out, based on everything from the consumer and the audience, the best creative messaging to serve at that time to help you make sure you convert that sale.
All right, last question before I give you my wrap up list here.
Okay.
This compressing the shopper journey, compressing the funnel means so many things to everyone. Tell us about that. What does that mean for you when it comes to the marketing approach and also the shopper journey?
Well, I think ultimately, as we kind of talked a little bit about front when we talked about holistic captaincy, is the shopper journey is no longer linear. You could start and pretty much end anywhere. And the length of that journey could be super short, or it could be over a longer period of time, depending on the category you're in, what products you're purchasing, or just your overall behavior. So today, I think instead of thinking that one action produces an output, like if I run national media, it's the thing that drove the sale, or if I ran a search campaign, or if I did merchandising in store, it's the one thing that did the sale. So many of those things contributed to the ultimate outcome. So it's really about continuing to find ways analytically to connect those dots together to figure out what the right combination is to get the greatest outcome. So I know that a lot of companies are on that journey. We certainly haven't completely figured it out. But the most important thing is we're aware that that's how shoppers behave nowadays. And we're trying to use many of the tools our partners have, as well as some of our own internal tools, to help sort through that so we can figure out, based on our objective and where we're going, the best way to approach it.
You seem like you have a natural fluidity to be able to talk about data, then talk about creative and partnerships and kind of move between them. Did you always have that ability? Was it something you kind of learned along the way, or how did that come about? Because so often I think, oh yeah, I'm good at this one area, but maybe I'm not as comfortable in the other area.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'll take that as a strong compliment. I would go back a little bit to just the different types of roles and experiences I've had. I would tell you that the path hasn't necessarily been intentional, only because as I mentioned up front, really enjoy tackling some creative challenges or problems. And in some cases, those have spanned different departments, different customers, different disciplines. So I think over time, just having taken that approach, just being naturally curious, you get exposed to a lot of things, both internally across the category with customers and in this space. And I would just say in general nowadays, again, my personal opinion, the more diversity of experience that you can get, the more comprehensively you can work through some of the challenges and understand all parts. And I feel like, from a consumer and shopper standpoint, the options that they have are infinite at this point, it feels like, and more than ever. But more importantly, our retailers are the partners in between that help, distribute and display and merchandise and connect those products to our shoppers. So being able to articulate a comprehensive view of the business, I think moving forward is going to be important for those partners of ours to trust our brands and our companies to do what needs to happen to make sure that we work with their shoppers and consumers.
Well, Brad, thanks for sharing your great journey with me. If you're up for it, I've got a couple of wrap-up questions that I can share back with you, and hopefully our listeners can get to know you a little better through those questions.
That sounds great.
All right, perfect. So first one, and I know it's hard to pick only two, but which two people have influenced you the most in your professional career?
I think in my case, I'll mention probably a little bit more of like it can come from a person, but maybe a little bit more of an epiphany than anything else, because there's so many great people that influence you over a journey. I'm not here to dismiss that there haven't been great people. There have been, but there's so many of them that's hard to call out just one. I would say a number of years ago, I was watching a video. I believe it was a TED Talk from Simon Sinek, and it was entitled "The Golden Circle." And he was talking about kind of the why, how, what framework, more so of positioning and thinking about that from, and as the way he positioned at the beginning of the video, why Apple was successful at the time. And while the intent of that message was great, it also made me think a little bit more so too about problem solving and approaching things and how to identify opportunities. So very often we think about what I want is to grow sales, and how I'll do it is that I'll put out merchandising and distribution, but then we lose sight of the consumer or the shopper, or name a myriad of things. So it just really helped me think a little bit more soundly about how I would work through opportunities and problems. And I think it's, been very valuable and helpful as I worked across more, complexity and scope across the business. So I would say that particular person and Simon, but more his message was definitely one. And then another gentleman that I'll just mention, who I've worked for a couple different times. He's a vice president here at the Hershey Company. His name is Tony Southard, and I've always admired his ability to be able to walk in a room and be able to talk to almost anybody. In fact, he seems to be, from my experience, like the Kevin Bacon of people I know. Like, he, as an example, just someone on my team who we just got introduced to the other day, he happened to know their parents somehow who live in Las Vegas. It's just like, how do you even know how to connect all these people? But anyway, he taught me long ago, when especially dealing with customers, this simple notion of, don't tell them what you can't do, but tell them what you can do. And it really had me take a step back of, there's always a lot of problems, but if you are able to, provide some opportunities and get there as best you can, and put it in the position of, you tell me what it is you want to do, but I'm not going to tell you what I can't do. It really opens up a more collaborative conversation in general with people. And that's also stuck with me as well as I think about, solving business problems and working across the board.
Rules for the road right there. And one of my favorite TED Talks of all time. So,
oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, those are great examples. This start with why. So it's so simple on the surface, but it's so powerful. And what can I do? I mean, it's such great advice, because it is easy to get caught up in. There's always so many challenges. What can I do is such a great thing to keep in mind. So thanks for those. Second question is, if you get time, when you get time outside of work and family, favorite hobbies, what do you like to do?
I do enjoy working out. So I had played sports in college, and it's something that has kind of stuck with me afterwards. So I'm older now. I can't go out there and do everything that I used to do, but staying active, whether it's running or lifting or basic stuff around the house like that is always great. And my kids are of age now where they're in sports, or they're interested in their own personal health. So it's fun to be able to do that together. And golf is another one. I don't nearly play it as much as I'd like, and I'm not nearly as good as I'd like to be. But to me, it's one of those ultimate sports where the only person you have to worry about is yourself, and consistency and technique and all those things are the key. And if it was easy, everyone could do it, but you might take 60 shots, you might take 100 shots in any given day, depending on a lot of factors. But there's a large, mental component to that as well that I enjoy. And I sound like I'm overly competitive in it. I have to be super realistic of what my outcome is going to be. But it's just that chance to kind of be with yourself and reflect on yourself and challenge yourself along the way.
Be the best you, which I think is what I hope we all are striving to do. So great way to think about it. Brad, if our listeners want to reach you or find you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure thing. So without giving personal social handles out, I think LinkedIn is probably the best and easiest way to do that. My name is Brad Santanna, spelled Santanna. Sometimes spelled with only one at the end. But if you enjoyed the conversation here and want to connect or learn more, I'm certainly open to you to send me a message. Would love to hear from you.
Been great talking with you. I enjoyed all the insights, the anecdotes. Those were great. We've got, as I mentioned, a ton of wonderful memories from the Hershey Company and the products. And it's great to put a face and a name and a conversation with all that. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. You've been the consummate host, and really appreciate the opportunity, Dave. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.